The security guard's flashlight hit my face at 3:47 a.m. "You can't sleep here, buddy." I wanted to tell him that 18 months ago, I owned the building he was protecting, that my signature on a single check could have bought his house, his car, his kids' college tuition. Instead, I just moved. My name is Marcus, and 6 months ago, I was digging through restaurant dumpsters, praying the food wasn't too rotten to keep down. But here's what's gonna mess with your head. I used to be worth $1.2 billion. Not million, billion. I know you're thinking it's impossible. How does someone fall that far, that fast? Well, let me ask you something first. What would you do if the person you loved most in this world looked you in the eye and said the 5 words that would destroy everything? Because that's exactly what happened to me. Her name was Sarah, my daughter. And on March 15th, 2023, she said something that didn't just break my heart, it broke my entire world. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to when I thought I had it all figured out, when my penthouse overlooking Central Park felt like a castle, not a prison. When I believed that success meant never having to worry about anything ever again. God, I was so wrong. You see, I spent 23 years building an empire. 23 years making deals, crushing competitors, accumulating wealth that most people can't even comprehend. I had politicians on speed dial, celebrities at my dinner parties, and enough money to buy a small country. But while I was busy conquering the world, I was losing the only battle that actually mattered. My daughter Sarah was growing up, and I was missing it. Every piano recital I skipped for a board meeting, every birthday I celebrated via FaceTime from some hotel in Dubai or Tokyo, every time she needed her dad and got my assistant instead. I thought I was building a legacy for her. Turns out, I was just building walls between us. The morning everything changed, I was in my home office, that massive room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a desk that cost more than most people's cars. I was on a call with investors in Singapore when Sarah walked in. She was 22 then, fresh out of Stanford, beautiful and brilliant, and everything I hoped she'd become. But when she looked at me that morning, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Disappointment, so deep, it felt like hatred. "Dad," she said, and her voice was shaking, "we need to talk." I held up one finger, "Just give me a minute, sweetheart," and kept talking about quarterly projections and market penetration, the same gesture I'd made 1,000 times before. That's when she said it, 5 words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "I don't know you anymore." And then she walked out. I had no idea that would be the last time I'd see my daughter for 8 months. I had no idea that within 6 weeks, every person I thought was my friend would disappear. And I definitely had no idea that the FBI was already building a case that would destroy everything I'd spent my entire adult life creating. See, success has this funny way of making you believe you're untouchable, that the rules that apply to everyone else somehow don't apply to you, that you're too big, too important, too connected to ever really fall. But gravity doesn't care about your bank account. And when you're standing on a foundation built on quicksand, it doesn't matter how high your tower reaches, you're going down. The fall was swift, brutal, and complete. 6 months from FBI raids to bankruptcy. 6 months from billionaire to homeless. 6 months to lose everything I thought defined who I was. But here's the thing nobody tells you about losing everything. Sometimes it's the only way to find out who you really are. Tonight, I'm going to tell you the whole story, every devastating detail of how I went from the penthouse to the park bench, how I discovered that some mistakes can't be bought out of, and how losing everything taught me what actually matters. This isn't just about money. It's about the price of success when success costs you your soul. It's about what happens when you realize that all the wealth in the world can't buy back the love of the person who matters most. If you've ever felt like you're chasing the wrong things, if you've ever wondered what success actually costs, if you've ever been so focused on winning that you forgot what you were fighting for, this story is for you. Hit that like button if you're ready for a story that's going to challenge everything you think you know about success. Subscribe, because this is just chapter 1 of a journey that goes deeper than you can imagine. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who might be making the same mistakes I did, share this with them. Because what I learned in those 6 months of hell, what Sarah taught me when she finally came back, that's when everything changed. That's when the real story begins. The security guard's flashlight hit my face at 3:47 a.m. "You can't sleep here, buddy." I wanted to tell him that 18 months ago, I owned the building he was protecting, that my signature on a single check could have bought his house, his car, his kids' college tuition. Instead, I just moved. My name is Marcus, and 6 months ago, I was digging through restaurant dumpsters, praying the food wasn't too rotten to keep down. But here's what's going to mess with your head. I used to be worth $1.2 billion, not million, billion. The morning everything changed, I was in my home office, that massive room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. I was on a call with investors in Singapore when Sarah walked in. She was 22 then, fresh out of Stanford, beautiful and brilliant and everything I hoped she'd become. But when she looked at me that morning, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Disappointment so deep it felt like hatred. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking, "we need to talk." I held up one finger, "Just give me a minute, sweetheart," and kept talking about quarterly projections, the same dismissive gesture I'd made 1,000 times before. That's when she said it. 5 words that would haunt me forever. "I don't know you anymore." Then she walked out. I had no idea that would be the last time I'd see my daughter for 8 months. No idea that within 6 weeks, every person I thought was my friend would disappear. And I definitely had no idea that the FBI was already building a case that would destroy everything I'd spent my entire adult life creating. The phone call came 3 hours later. "Mr. Richardson, this is Agent Patricia Wells with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have a warrant to search your premises and seize your assets pending investigation into securities fraud, money laundering, and racketeering." The words felt surreal, like dialogue from a movie I was accidentally watching. "We'll be there within the hour." I remember staring at my Patek Philippe watch, thinking time would somehow reverse if I just kept watching those hands tick. But time doesn't go backwards, and some words can't be taken back. 23 years. That's how long it took me to build an empire worth over $1 billion, and exactly 6 months to watch it crumble into nothing. But sitting here now, I realize the cracks were always there. I just refused to see them. It started innocently enough. Small accounting adjustments here, creative interpretations there. When you're moving millions of dollars daily, a few thousand tucked away doesn't seem significant. When you're managing pension funds and investment portfolios, borrowing against future returns feels like smart business. When politicians and celebrities are calling you for favors, bending rules feels like privilege, not crime. My company, Richardson Financial Group, managed assets for everyone who mattered. Tech billionaires, Hollywood A-listers, 3 sitting senators, and half the Fortune 500. We promised returns that seemed impossible, and somehow we delivered them, at least on paper. The Ponzi scheme wasn't planned, it evolved. One bad quarter led to borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. One market downturn required creative bookkeeping to maintain our stellar reputation. Before I knew it, we were running a house of cards that required constant new money to keep from collapsing. But I told myself we'd make it back. Smart investments, lucky breaks, bull markets, something would save us. I convinced myself I wasn't stealing, I was borrowing. I wasn't defrauding clients, I was buying time to make them whole. Every lie felt justified, because the alternative was admitting I'd failed everyone who trusted me. The irony cuts deep. While I was stealing millions to maintain the illusion of success, I was losing the one thing that actually mattered: Sarah's childhood, her trust, her love. I missed every important moment of her life, chasing money that was never really mine. The morning the FBI raided our offices, they seized computers containing evidence of 13 years of systematic fraud, fabricated statements sent to clients, phantom investments that existed only in spreadsheets.
wire transfers moving money in circles to create the illusion of legitimate trading. When they perp-walked me out of my own building, past employees I'd worked with for years, past the marble lobby with my name etched in gold letters, I finally understood. I hadn't been building a legacy. I'd been constructing an elaborate lie that would destroy everyone it touched. Prison is where you learn who you really are when everything else is stripped away. Orange jumpsuit, shared cell, meals that taste like cardboard, none of that broke me. What shattered my soul was the silence.
Sarah wouldn't take my calls. My ex-wife Helena changed her number. My brother, my business partners, friends I'd known for decades, they all disappeared like morning fog. The phone in the county jail would ring and ring until the automated message clicked on, "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." My lawyer, Marcus Goldstein, no relation, just cruel cosmic humor, visited twice a week initially. "Marcus, we need to discuss plea options. The evidence is overwhelming. They have 13 years of falsified documents, witness testimony from your CFO, and paper trails that lead directly back to you." I'd stare at him across that scratched metal table and think about Sarah. About how she used to wait for me at the window when I came home from business trips, pressed against the glass like a small bird. How she'd run to me when I walked through the door, arms wide, shouting, "Daddy's home," with pure joy that made every deal, every dollar, every sacrifice feel worthwhile. "Where is my daughter?" I'd ask him instead of discussing legal strategy. "Marcus, we need to focus on the charges. The prosecution is seeking 25 years. Where is Sarah?" He'd shuffle his papers, avoiding my eyes. "Her mother has requested no contact. There's a restraining order." A restraining order? Against me? From my own daughter? The words hit harder than any sentence the judge could deliver. In my cell at night, listening to my cellmate's labored breathing, I'd replay every missed moment. Every time I chose a board meeting over her school play. Every time I sent my assistant to parent-teacher conferences because I was closing a deal in London. Every birthday celebrated via FaceTime from some sterile hotel room. The other inmates thought I was weak because I cried. They didn't understand that I wasn't mourning the money or the mansion or the private jets. I was grieving something far more valuable, the relationship with the only person who ever loved me unconditionally. How many of us are so busy chasing success that we're destroying the very relationships that make success meaningful? 18 months. That's how long I served before they released me on supervised parole. 18 months of living in an 8x10 cell, eating processed food, and wearing clothes that belonged to other broken men. But prison was luxury compared to what waited outside. No one tells you about the practical impossibilities of rebuilding after you've lost everything. Every apartment application rejected because of criminal background checks. Every job interview ending when they Google your name and find headlines, "Billionaire financier sentenced for massive Ponzi scheme." Every phone call to old contacts met with immediate hang-ups. The halfway house in Queens was a concrete building filled with men society had forgotten. Drug dealers trying to stay clean, white-collar criminals like me who'd lost everything, violent offenders working their way back into a world that didn't want them. We were united by one thing. We'd all fallen further than we ever imagined possible. My bunkmate was Tommy, a former accountant who'd embezzled from a children's charity. "The worst part," he told me one night, "isn't the shame. It's how invisible you become, like you never existed." He was right. I'd walk through Manhattan streets where I once commanded respect, past buildings where I'd closed $100 million deals, and no one looked at me. Not because they didn't recognize me, but because men like me, ex-felons, the disgraced, the fallen, are trained to be invisible in a city that worships success. The food stamps were humiliating. Standing in line at government offices, filling out forms asking about assets and income, knowing that 18 months earlier I could have bought the building we were sitting in. The social worker, a tired woman named Maria, looked at my application with barely concealed disgust. "Says here you were convicted of financial crimes. How much did you steal, Mr. Richardson?" $467 million. The number felt abstract, like I was describing someone else's life. She whistled low. "And now you're asking taxpayers to feed you? That's rich." Rich. The word followed me everywhere.
Rich man, rich boy, rich asshole who got what he deserved. But I wasn't rich anymore. I was something worse than poor. I was guilty poor, deservedly poor, righteously punished poor. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the humiliation. It was knowing that somewhere in this same city, my daughter was living her life, probably happier without me in it. Winter in New York hits different when you don't have anywhere warm to go. The halfway house kicked me out after 4 months for missing curfew, not because I was using drugs or committing crimes, but because I'd walked 15 miles looking for work and gotten back 10 minutes late. That's how I ended up sleeping in Riverside Park, where Sarah and I used to feed ducks when she was 7. The cruel poetry wasn't lost on me. 23 years earlier, I'd pushed her on those same swings, promising her the world. Now, I was stealing toilet paper from the public restrooms and hoping the police wouldn't run me off before dawn. Homeless shelters have waiting lists. Who knew? In movies, desperate people just show up and get a bed. Reality is a lottery system, background checks, and beds reserved for women with children or men with disabilities. Healthy white men who made their own catastrophic choices rank pretty low on the sympathy scale. I learned the unspoken rules quickly. Don't make eye contact with joggers. It makes them uncomfortable. Don't sit too long in one place, or security guards get nervous. Don't smell too bad, or restaurants won't let you use their bathrooms. Don't look too pathetic, or other homeless people will assume you're weak and steal what little you have. The hunger was constant. Not the polite hunger of skipping lunch between meetings, but the gnawing, desperate hunger that makes you understand why people commit crimes for $20. I'd stand outside expensive restaurants watching people leave half their meals uneaten, knowing those scraps contained more nutrition than I'd had all week.
But the cold was nothing compared to the invisibility. I'd sit on benches where I used to walk past without thinking, watching successful people stride by with the confidence I once possessed. Phone calls about deals, complaints about traffic, plans for weekend houses in the Hamptons. The life I used to live played out in front of me like a movie I could no longer afford to see. One December morning, I was warming my hands over a grate near Central Park when I saw her, Sarah, walking past with a man I didn't recognize, laughing at something he'd said. She looked healthy, happy, radiant. Her hair caught the morning light, and for a moment she looked exactly like she had at 7, running toward me with arms wide open. She walked within 10 feet of me, my daughter, my heart, my everything. She didn't see me, didn't sense me, didn't feel the weight of my desperate love calling out to her from across an impossible distance. When we become invisible to society, do we also become invisible to ourselves, or does losing everything finally reveal who we truly are? I started writing letters to Sarah in a composition notebook I found in a dumpster behind Columbia University. Pages stained with coffee and tears, written with a pen someone had dropped on the subway. Letters I knew I'd never send, words I'd never say, apologies that would never reach her ears. "Dear Sarah," the first one began, "I'm sorry isn't big enough for what I've done to you." I wrote about missing her piano recitals, about choosing Singapore investors over her graduation speech, about building an empire of lies while she was building a life without me. Each letter was longer than the last, as if more words could somehow bridge the canyon I'd created between us. The public library on 42nd Street became my office. Free Wi-Fi, warm tables, bathrooms with soap and hot water. I'd sit among students and freelancers, scribbling letters to my daughter while researching jobs I'd never get, apartments I couldn't afford, and ways to legally contact a young woman who'd filed a restraining order against her own father. Other homeless men thought I was crazy, writing constantly in that dirty notebook. "Who you writin' to, college boy?" Tommy from the shelter would ask. I'd never answer. How do you explain that you're trying to have a relationship with someone who pretends you don't exist? The letters became my confession, my therapy, my only remaining connection to the person I used to be. I wrote about the first time I held her in the hospital, how small and perfect she was, how I promised her mother I'd never let anything hurt our baby girl. I wrote about teaching her to ride a bike, about bedtime stories where she was always the princess who saved herself. But mostly, I wrote about the choices.
Every deal I prioritized over her dance recital, every phone call I took during her bedtime story. Every time I said, "Just 5 more minutes, sweetheart," and turned back to my computer. Death by 1,000 tiny betrayals, each one seeming insignificant until the cumulative weight destroyed everything I actually cared about.
Dear Sarah, I wrote on a particularly cold Thursday in February. I used to think love meant providing for you, making sure you had the best schools, the nicest clothes, opportunities other kids didn't have. I thought working 18-hour days was sacrifice for you. I thought building wealth was building your future. I was wrong about everything. The notebook filled up. I found another one, then another. 3 composition books filled with letters to a daughter who'd changed her phone number, moved to an address I didn't know, and built a life where I was nothing more than a cautionary tale she might share with therapists. Sometimes I'd see families in the library, fathers helping children with homework, mothers reading picture books to toddlers. I'd watch the easy intimacy between parents and children, the casual affection I'd traded for quarterly earnings reports and investor meetings. Those moments hurt more than hunger, more than cold, more than the daily humiliation of being society's discarded trash. Her name was Elena, and she saved my life with a cup of coffee and a sandwich from the deli on Amsterdam Avenue. March 15th, exactly 1 year after Sarah spoke those 5 words that changed everything. The date wasn't lost on me. Cruel anniversaries have their own gravity. I was sitting outside the subway station, holding a cardboard sign that said, "Anything helps, God bless." The words felt ridiculous coming from a man who'd stopped believing in God the day FBI agents walked him out of his own building in handcuffs. But homeless begging apparently has its own liturgy of desperation. Elena stopped when most people hurried past. Mid-30s, nurse scrubs under a worn winter coat, tired eyes that had seen enough suffering to recognize it in others. She crouched down to my level instead of dropping coins from above, a small gesture that meant everything to a man who'd become accustomed to being invisible. "When did you last eat?" she asked, in accented English. Puerto Rican, maybe Dominican? "Tuesday," I said. "It was Friday." She disappeared into the deli and returned with a turkey sandwich, black coffee, and a bag of chips. Then she did something that broke me completely. She sat down next to me on the cold concrete and shared the meal. Not watching from a safe distance, not hurrying away after her good deed. She sat with me like I was human. "My brother Carlos," she said between bites. "He was homeless for 3 years. Drugs, you know. But before that, he was a math teacher. People don't become homeless because they're lazy. They become homeless because life breaks them in ways that are hard to fix." I wanted to tell her I'd broken myself, that I'd earned every moment of suffering, that her brother deserved compassion in ways I didn't. Instead, I just said, "Thank you." The words came out cracked and small. Elena visited twice a week after that. Always the same routine. Deli sandwich, black coffee, 20 minutes of conversation where she treated me like a person instead of a problem. She told me about her job at Mount Sinai, about her 2 kids, about her hope that Carlos would stay clean this time. I told her about Sarah, about the letters I wrote but never sent, about waking up every morning to the weight of knowing I'd destroyed the most important relationship in my life for money that was never really mine. Elena listened without judgment, without advice, without trying to fix what couldn't be repaired. "You know," she said one April afternoon, "forgiveness isn't about deserving it, it's about needing it. Your daughter might forgive you someday, or she might not, but you gotta forgive yourself first, or you'll die out here with all that poison in your heart." Those words followed me for days. Forgiveness, a concept I'd abandoned along with everything else I used to believe in. How do you forgive yourself for destroying your child's faith in you? How do you release the guilt that feels like the only connection you have left to who you used to be? The miracle happened on a rainy Tuesday in May. I was standing in line at the food bank on 125th Street when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in 2 years. "Marcus, Jesus Christ, is that really you?"
David Chen, my former college roommate, now a successful cardiac surgeon at Presbyterian. We'd lost touch after I got rich and started running in circles that didn't include anyone who remembered me before I had money. Seeing him in that food bank line felt surreal, like two different universes colliding. "Dave, what are you doing here?" The question was absurd. I was the one holding a number for free groceries, wearing clothes I'd found in donation bags. "Volunteering," he said simply. "Have been for 10 years, every Tuesday after surgery rotation." He looked at my situation without the disgust I'd grown accustomed to. "You hungry? Let's get you fed, then let's talk." David didn't ask about the crimes or the money or the spectacular fall from grace. He treated me like the 20-year-old kid who used to help him study organic chemistry, who'd covered for him when he was too hungover to make his 8 a.m. classes. Like the past 23 years of wealth and corruption had never happened. "You still write?" he asked over coffee at a diner near the hospital. "Remember how you used to talk about being a journalist before you discovered finance?" I'd forgotten about those dreams, about the summer internship at the Village Voice, about the novel I'd started and never finished, about believing I could change the world with words instead of money. That was a long time ago. Wasn't that long. You're 52, not dead, and you've got a story to tell that might help people avoid the mistakes you made. David was right, but I couldn't see it then. All I could see was failure, disgrace, the impossibility of rebuilding from nothing. But he persisted with the quiet determination I remembered from medical school. "There's a community newspaper in Queens. They're looking for someone to write about social issues, homelessness, recovery. Pay is garbage, but it's a start."
The editor, Maria Santos, was skeptical. "You're the guy who stole all that money? Why should anyone trust what you have to say?" Fair question. I didn't have a good answer, except honesty. "Because I've been on both sides," I told her. "I know what it feels like to have everything and what it costs to get it, and I know what it feels like to lose it all. Maybe that perspective is worth something." She gave me one assignment: write about the experience of applying for government assistance as a former millionaire. 500 words, due Friday. If it was good, we'd talk about more work. I wrote 3,000 words about the shame, the bureaucracy, the way poverty strips you of dignity one form at a time, about social workers who treat you like a criminal and systems designed to humiliate rather than help, about the difference between choosing to be broke and having no choice at all. Maria published it unchanged. The response was immediate. Letters from readers who'd experienced similar falls from grace, from social workers who wanted to do better, from people who'd never understood how someone could go from wealth to homelessness so quickly. For the first time in 2 years, I felt useful. The apartment wasn't much, a studio in Astoria with thin walls and thinner bank account requirements, but it had a door that locked and a window that faced east toward the sunrise. After 18 months of sleeping in shelters, halfway houses, and park benches, having my own space felt like winning the lottery. The job at the Queens Community Voice paid $600 a week, barely enough to cover rent, food, and MetroCard, but enough to start rebuilding something resembling a life. I wrote about everything the mainstream media ignored: veterans struggling with PTSD, single mothers navigating welfare bureaucracy, elderly people choosing between medicine and food. Stories of people society had written off, told by someone society had written off. The work gave me purpose, but it couldn't fill the Sarah-shaped hole in my chest. I carried those 3 notebooks everywhere, adding letters I'd never send to a daughter who'd moved on without me. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of her life through social media: graduation photos, career achievements, glimpses of the amazing woman she'd become despite having me as a father. In September, something impossible happened. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was unmistakable. "Dad?" 2 years, 6 months, and 13 days since I'd heard Sarah's voice. I'd counted. "Sarah, how did you get this number?" "I've been reading your articles. David Chen reached out to me through Mom. He said that you were trying to get your life together."
Her voice was cautious, like she was talking to a dangerous animal that might bolt.
I'm trying. The words felt inadequate. Sarah, I can't tell you how sorry I don't. The sharpness in her voice cut through my apology. I'm not ready for sorry yet. I'm calling because I have something to tell you, and you need to hear it from me. My heart stopped. Was she sick? Married? Moving across the country? What is it? I'm pregnant. 3 words that changed everything again. You're going to be a grandfather. The silence stretched between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. A grandchild. Sarah's child. New life growing from the ashes of everything I'd destroyed. I don't know if you'll ever meet this baby, she continued, her voice softer now. I don't know if I can trust you not to break their heart the way you broke mine. But they deserve to know their grandfather existed. That's why I'm calling. Sarah, please. I read your article about missing your daughter's childhood. Every word of it was true. You chose money over me, work over family, success over love. You taught me that I wasn't worth your time, that business deals mattered more than bedtime stories. Each word was a knife, but they were true knives, deserved knives. But you also taught me what kind of parent I don't want to be, she said. And maybe that's worth something too. We talked for 23 minutes about her pregnancy, her job, her life, about the restraining order she was ready to lift, about supervised visits that might be possible someday, about forgiveness being a process, not an event. When she hung up, I sat in my tiny apartment and cried harder than I had since the day I lost everything. But for the first time in almost 3 years, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of possibility. Today marks 3 years since I lost everything. 3 years since Sarah walked out of my life. 2 years since I slept on those park benches, wondering if anyone would notice if I disappeared. 1 year since she called to tell me I was going to be a grandfather. The baby was born 6 weeks ago. Emma Charlotte Richardson Matthews. Sarah hyphenated her last name when she married Tom, keeping part of me even when she wanted to forget I existed. That small grace means more than any fortune I ever accumulated. I haven't met Emma yet. Sarah's still not ready, and I understand why. Trust, once shattered completely, takes time to rebuild. But she sends photos sometimes. Emma has Sarah's dark hair and eyes, but something about her tiny hands reminds me of Sarah as a newborn, those perfect little fingers that used to wrap around mine with absolute faith. Dad, Sarah said during our last phone call, Tom and I have been talking. We want Emma to know her grandfather, but we need to do this slowly, and we need to know you're really different this time. Different? Am I different? I live in a studio apartment in Queens and take the subway to work. I write stories about people society ignores for a newspaper most people don't read. I have $847 in my checking account and consider that wealth because I can pay rent and buy groceries. By every external measure, I'm a failure compared to who I used to be. But I sleep 8 hours every night without waking up in panic about fabricated investment returns. I eat dinner without checking my phone for market updates from Tokyo. I walk through Central Park and see families instead of potential clients. I measure success in stories told, lives touched, small differences made in forgotten corners of the world. The letters to Sarah evolved into something else. I still write, but now they're letters to Emma. Letters about the grandfather she might meet someday, about lessons learned from spectacular failure, about the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Rich is money in the bank. Wealthy is having people who love you despite your mistakes. David visits every few weeks, usually bringing Chinese takeout and updates from the world I used to inhabit. Former colleagues in federal prison, companies I'd done business with facing their own scandals, a financial world that moved on without ever noticing I was gone. "You seem peaceful," he said last week, "different than when you had all that money." He's right. Poverty stripped away everything I thought defined me, revealing something I'd forgotten existed. Marcus the father, Marcus the writer, Marcus the human being who'd gotten lost in Marcus the mogul. Elena still stops by sometimes, usually with homemade cookies and updates about Carlos, who's been clean for 2 years and teaching math again. "You saved my life," I told her once. "You gave me food when I was starving and hope when I was dying." "Nah, mijo," she said, laughing. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you that you were worth saving." Tomorrow, Sarah is coming to visit my apartment. She wants to see how I live now, who I've become, whether I'm someone she might trust with her daughter's heart. It's the most important interview of my life, and there's no preparing for it except being honest about the journey that brought me here. I've learned something these past 3 years. Losing everything isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of your real story. The story of who you are when the money and power and prestige are stripped away. The story of what you do when you have nothing left to lose except your humanity. My name is Marcus Richardson. I was worth $1.2 billion. I lost it all. I was homeless. I was broken. And I discovered that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. If my story resonates with you, if it makes you think about what really matters, if it reminds you to hug your children before you check your email, then please share it. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances. Subscribe if you want to follow this journey, because Emma Charlotte Richardson Matthews deserves to know her grandfather's real story. The story of losing everything and finding what actually matters. The story of falling as far as someone can fall and discovering that rock bottom isn't the end. It's the foundation you build on. Tomorrow, Sarah comes to visit. Tomorrow, I start earning the right to hold my granddaughter. Tomorrow, the real story begins. Share this story if it reminds you what truly matters. Like if you believe in redemption. Subscribe to follow Marcus as he works to rebuild the relationship that matters most. Because some stories don't end with the fall, they begin with the climb back up.